Hello and welcome to this News9 special. The ASEAN is considered one of the most influential groupings of countries in the world, and it is said to be a group of nations that has the potential to drive the economic growth of the world. It has in fact proven itself as Asian tigers, but however, when it comes to engaging with them, India has been slow. But however, that policy was also changed, and now we can say that deeper engagement with ASEAN has been giving the kind of dividends that we would have expected. And India and several other countries such as the United States, China, Japan and Australia are also in dialogue partners with this particular grouping. Now, one of the things that has been with regards to this particular group is trade and security ties. It is to be noted that recently we did have defense ties established with the Philippines, which is one of the member groups of the ASEAN. With Vietnam also, we share a very good personal ties, as well as to also ensure that some of our defense products have become quite lucrative as well with the Vietnamese also. However, Prime Minister Modi's engagement with the leaders of the bloc, that has in fact shown that India is still pursuing the fact that deepening ties with ASEAN is core and pillar of its Look East policy. The Prime Minister did speak at the summit, and he also interacted on a one-on-one basis with the ASEAN leaders as well. We're also now in fact joined in by Suresh K. Goel, who is a former Indian diplomat. We'll also be joined in by Sandeep Dixit, associate editor with the Tribune. When Mr. Goel, the first thing that I noticed is that India has always been trying to engage with the ASEAN region for quite some time. One, of course, the cultural affinity that is there, the shared history and geography that we are in fact looking at. This engagement, however, has come quite late because we were engaged with the Cold War, we were too much preoccupied with Europe and then in Africa. But then suddenly you realize that this huge economic bloc just in our neighborhood, which we can have close trade ties with, and they are culturally having an affinity with us. We have civilizational ties with them, and many of them have imbibed India's culture at large. But this realization came quite late when it comes to India's foreign policy decision makers, but better late than never?
Absolutely. In fact, I started my diplomatic career in Singapore, then I went on to Malaysia, and therefore I've experienced the kind of difference that came in a relationship between India and ASEAN in 1990s, early 90s. Let me just make one, you're absolutely right in whatever you said. There is just one correction here, that the engagement between India and the Southeast Asian countries is not even from 1991. It has always been there. Please remember that Cambodia, basically cultural factor, but remember Myanmar called Burma at that time, the huge Indian community that used to live there. And in fact, the Indian mission in Rangoon, called at that time Rangoon, was located in the LIC building. LIC was the main economic entity in Burma at that time. Burma Shell operated on the basis of Burma name. Similarly, we had great relations with Cambodia. We had great relations with Laos. India was chairing the ICSC in 1950 for the resolution of Indo-China War. Therefore, all I'm saying is that the relationship was there, but it acquired a greater component, much more intensive economic component in 1990s when we realized that on the basis of a free economy, capitalist economy, free economy, these countries in ASEAN had progressed so much faster, and there was a great potential for economic engagement then with India and these countries. And then we used culture as the bridge between us to promote that economic engagement. And then we came on to the early 2000s when Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew was looking at the overall geopolitical and geo-economic situation. And if you recall, it is he who said, when he was trying to get India into the East Asia Summit, and it is he who said that ASEAN requires two engines to fly. If he gave the analogy of ASEAN as a plane, and the two wings would be China and India. He had always imagined India as a kind of a balancing strategic entity in the region. And that is what is now happening. India and China are coming out to be really not as competitors, but as two powers which economically, not militarily so much, but strategically and politically, are working together to balance each other out and to basically uh, turn the competition between them into some kind of a balancing situation in Indo-Pacific. Uh, as Indo-Pacific power, India has a good role to play in ASEAN, and I think all the ASEAN countries are recognize that. It was Prime Minister Modi who said that ASEAN will be always central to Indo-Pacific. So we recognize the role being played by ASEAN in the whole game of the situation evolving in ASEAN, and it's good to know that we continue to grow our trade and economic cooperation in a very significant manner.